Your mind is a powerful thing, always processing, always interpreting, always making sense of the world. But what if I told you that, without even realizing it, your brain takes shortcuts, that your decisions, your memories, even your beliefs are shaped by hidden biases you don't even notice? Tonight, we're diving into the fascinating world of cognitive biases, the mental patterns that subtly guide our thoughts, sometimes in ways we'd never expect. No pressure, no overthinking, just a slow, soothing journey through the quirks of the mind. So, close your eyes, relax, and let the gentle flow of ideas carry you into sleep. Welcome to 2 hours of cognitive biases to fall asleep to. The Dunning-Kruger effect. The less you know, the more confident you feel. The mind is a vast and intricate landscape, where thoughts weave and bend, sometimes in directions we least expect. Among the many curiosities that shape how we think and act, one stands out for its paradoxical nature: the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's an idea so simple, yet so profound, that it's hard to ignore once you've noticed it. It suggests that the less we know about something, the more confident we are, and conversely, the more we know, the more likely we are to doubt ourselves. This phenomenon isn't just a trick of the mind, it's a cognitive bias that affects us all, often without our awareness. Imagine a person with just a little bit of knowledge on a subject. Maybe they've read a few articles, watched a couple of videos, or attended a workshop. Armed with this surface-level information, they feel like they've got it all figured out. They speak confidently, offering opinions as if they are an expert, certain that they understand the intricacies of the subject at hand. Meanwhile, the real experts, those who have spent years studying, practicing, and refining their understanding, often hesitate, question their own conclusions, and express doubts about their abilities. It's a curious thing, isn't it? Why does the person with the least knowledge often appear the most confident? And why do those with deeper expertise sometimes feel the most unsure of themselves? The answer lies within the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias that reveals how we, as human beings, tend to overestimate our abilities when we have only a limited understanding, while the truly knowledgeable see the vastness of what they don't know, and as a result, feel less certain. The Dunning-Kruger effect operates through a combination of factors. When we first encounter a new topic or skill, we only see the surface, the basic principles, the introductory concepts. This limited knowledge makes us feel competent, as if we understand the essential elements of the subject. This is because, at the beginning, we don't yet know enough to grasp the complexities, the subtle nuances, and the deeper layers of the subject. We don't yet understand how much more there is to learn, so we mistakenly assume that we know it all. In contrast, as we dive deeper into the topic and gain more knowledge, we start to recognize the depth and complexity of the subject. The more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know. The gaps in our understanding become more apparent, and with this awareness comes self-doubt. The more we uncover, the more humble we become in the face of what is still unknown. This paradox, that knowledge can both empower and humble us, lies at the heart of the Dunning-Kruger effect. This effect is not limited to any particular field or domain. Whether in science, art, business, or even personal relationships, we see the same pattern. The less someone knows, the more confident they are, and the more they know, the more uncertain they become. It's a psychological quirk that shapes our decision-making and influences our interactions with others. We often encounter this effect in everyday life, whether in conversations with friends, at work, or even when we're learning something new. It's easy to become overconfident when we don't yet realize the complexity of what we're dealing with. Take, for example, a person who has recently learned to play the guitar. After learning a few chords and strumming along to a few songs, they feel invincible. They might confidently claim to be a guitarist, fully convinced of their abilities. However, an experienced musician, who has spent years honing their craft, knows just how much more there is to learn. They know that the true mastery of an instrument comes with practice, patience, and an understanding of the subtleties of music that go far beyond basic chords. The beginner, unaware of these complexities, feels a sense of competence that the expert, aware of the vastness of the subject, does not. The same can be seen in the world of academia. Students who have just started studying a particular subject may feel like they understand the basics completely. They can explain the fundamental concepts and even engage in discussions with peers, often with an air of certainty. But as they dive deeper into the subject, they begin to realize how much more there is to know, how many layers of complexity they hadn't yet encountered. This growing awareness of their own limitations leads to doubt and hesitation, even as their knowledge becomes more profound. The experienced scholar, who has spent years in deep study, might express similar feelings of uncertainty, recognizing that there is always more to explore. It's fascinating to think about how this cognitive bias influences our decision-making. The Dunning-Kruger effect can lead us to make bold, sometimes reckless decisions when we're unaware of our own limitations. A person who knows just a little about a subject may overestimate their abilities and make decisions with far-reaching consequences. They may feel certain that they've got everything figured out, even when they're only scratching the surface. On the other hand, those with more knowledge may hesitate, unsure of their decisions, because they're more aware of the complexities and the potential risks involved. This effect doesn't just apply to individuals. It can shape how entire groups or organizations make decisions. In a workplace, for example, someone with a little knowledge about a particular process may push for changes or improvements, confident in their understanding. Meanwhile, the experts in the field may be more cautious, aware of the complexities and potential pitfalls that the less experienced might overlook. The Dunning-Kruger effect can create tension between those who feel certain and those who understand the complexities of a situation, often leading to disagreements or misunderstandings. Despite the negative consequences the Dunning-Kruger effect can sometimes cause, it also serves as a reminder of the importance of humility and self-awareness. Recognizing that there's always more to learn can be a powerful tool for personal growth. When we understand that our knowledge is limited and that there is always more to discover, we become better equipped to make informed decisions, to seek out new information, and to approach challenges with a sense of openness rather than arrogance. Interestingly, the Dunning-Kruger effect also highlights the value of learning from others. As we deepen our understanding of a topic, we become more aware of the vast network of knowledge that exists beyond our own experiences. We begin to see the value in seeking guidance from experts, in listening to those who have spent years studying and practicing. We realize that expertise is not about knowing everything, but about understanding the limits of our own knowledge and continuously striving to improve. In a way, the Dunning-Kruger effect offers us a glimpse into the nature of expertise itself. True mastery is not about being infallible or knowing everything. It's about recognizing the complexity of the world and continuously working to expand our understanding. It's about being comfortable with uncertainty and knowing that growth comes from the willingness to learn, to ask questions, and to admit when we don't have all the answers. This bias, though it may seem frustrating or confusing, is part of the intricate way our brains process the world. It's a natural part of learning, a phenomenon that we all experience at some point. Whether we're just starting to learn something new, or we've been studying a subject for years, the Dunning-Kruger effect reminds us that knowledge is a journey, not a destination. And along that journey, there will always be new insights, new challenges, and new discoveries waiting for us. As we reflect on this effect, we can find comfort in knowing that it's okay to not have all the answers. We don't need to be experts to make progress or to find meaning in our experiences. What matters is our willingness to embrace the unknown, to stay curious, and to keep learning. Because in the end, the more we know, the more we realize how much there is to discover. And in that realization, there's always room for growth. So as you continue your own journey through life, remember the lessons of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Know that it's not about how much you know, but about how open you are to learning, to recognizing your own limitations, and to humbly seeking the wisdom of others. And as you navigate through the complexities of knowledge and understanding, let that humility be your guide, for it is in that space of self-awareness that true wisdom lies. The anchoring bias. The first number changes everything. Imagine a peaceful evening, the kind where the air is cool and the silence whispers a calm that envelops everything around you. You're lying down, about to drift into a deep, restful sleep, when your mind begins to wander. As you breathe in, slowly and deeply, you think about the little things, the subtle forces that guide your choices in life, the hidden patterns in your thoughts. There's one such pattern, so gentle and unseen, yet so powerful in its influence over your decisions. It's called the anchoring bias, a quiet nudge that shapes your perceptions and judgments in ways you might never notice, like a soft breeze that pushes you in a direction you didn't even realize you were headed. Picture this: you're standing in front of a shop window, eyeing a beautifully crafted piece of furniture. The price tag catches your eye. Let's say it reads $2,000. Now, imagine you step inside the store and see another, almost identical piece, but this time the price reads $1,500. Your mind, without any conscious effort, begins to think that $1,500 is a good deal. You're pleased with the price, almost relieved, as if you found something that's not only beautiful, but also affordable. But here's the thing: the only reason you think it's affordable is because you saw that first $2,000 price tag. That first number, that initial anchor, has shaped your entire perspective on what constitutes value. This subtle bias, the anchoring bias, works quietly in the background of our lives. We may not even realize it's happening, but once that first piece of information is presented to us, it's like a mental anchor that drags all our subsequent thoughts toward it. It doesn't matter if that first number or statistic is arbitrary or irrelevant to the decision we're making. It doesn't even matter if it's completely disconnected from the thing we're deciding on. All that matters is that it came first. The mind has a peculiar way of locking on to that initial piece of data, and it won't easily let go. Imagine you're negotiating for a car. The first offer you hear from the salesperson is $25,000. Even if you're not particularly interested in that exact car, your mind now operates within the framework of that number. No matter how much you haggle, and no matter how low the price goes, your judgment of what's fair or reasonable will always be influenced by that first number. Even if the final price is still high, you'll likely feel a sense of relief, a satisfaction, as though you've won something. The anchoring bias has done its work. The strange thing about the anchoring bias is that it doesn't have to be tied to anything relevant to the decision you're making. A simple, unrelated number can completely alter how you perceive a situation. Let's say you're at a dinner party, and someone casually mentions that the average person spends $100 a month on groceries. Later that evening, when you're at the store picking up a few things, you may find yourself thinking that $50 is a perfectly reasonable amount to spend. The first number, that $100, has created a subtle frame of reference for your choices, and suddenly, you're judging everything in relation to it. This bias doesn't only apply to numbers or prices. It works in many different aspects of life. Think about the first time you're presented with a statistic. Let's say you're reading an article about the environment, and it starts by telling you that 70% of the world's forests have already been cut down. That piece of information becomes a kind of anchor for your understanding of the issue. Even if you later read other statistics that paint a more optimistic picture, that initial number stays with you, coloring your perception of the entire situation. Even in social interactions, the anchoring bias can have a surprising influence. Imagine meeting someone for the first time. The first thing they tell you about themselves becomes your anchor. Perhaps they mention their job title or a particular achievement, and suddenly, your entire perception of who they are is based on that one piece of information. You might overlook other qualities about them. Maybe they're funny, or kind, or creative, but your initial impression is shaped by that first number, that first piece of data. In the world of marketing, the anchoring bias is a powerful tool. Companies know how to use it to their advantage, setting high initial prices to make subsequent discounts seem like a good deal. If you walk into a store and see an item marked at $500 and then see a similar item for $300, your mind will likely perceive the second item as a bargain. But in reality, that $300 price tag might still be inflated. The first number, the anchor, has done its job in steering your perception, guiding your decisions in a way that feels almost effortless. Even when you think you're immune to it, the anchoring bias works on a subconscious level, often without you realizing how much it's influencing you. Imagine you're at a job interview. The first question the interviewer asks is about your salary expectations. This number, the first offer, will likely influence the rest of the conversation. Even if you have a specific number in mind, you may find yourself adjusting it based on the initial offer. Your mind locks onto that first piece of information, and it becomes the anchor for everything that follows. What's fascinating is that the anchoring bias can even affect your physical responses. Studies have shown that when people are exposed to higher anchor numbers, like a high price tag or a larger statistic, they tend to evaluate things differently, often feeling a sense of scarcity or urgency. This psychological reaction is like a ripple that spreads throughout your mind and body, altering your decisions and emotions in subtle, unconscious ways. Now take a moment to let these thoughts settle in. Picture yourself in a situation where you are faced with an anchor. You may not even realize it, but your mind is already adjusting, recalibrating based on that first piece of information. It's like the first step on a journey, setting the tone for everything that comes afterward. This anchor, no matter how seemingly insignificant, has shaped your path in ways that may surprise you. It's almost like a gentle current, guiding you without resistance, sometimes leading you toward decisions you didn't consciously choose. And as you settle deeper into this thought, you begin to feel the subtle weight of that realization. The mind, so complex and intricate, operates in ways that are both mysterious and predictable. It's as if the first piece of information, the first number you encounter, begins to ripple out, influencing not only your decisions but also your emotions and perceptions. The anchoring bias weaves its influence, ever present, ever subtle, and yet so powerful. Think about the last time you made a decision, big or small. What was the first number, the first statistic, or the first piece of information that influenced you? Did you know that this seemingly insignificant detail may have been the anchor shaping your judgment, whether you realized it or not? You may feel the slow comfort of understanding this bias, and how it influences us all in such quiet ways, as you drift further into relaxation. As you think about the anchoring bias, imagine it like a quiet, unspoken force in the background of your life, gently guiding you, quietly steering you toward decisions you might not have consciously made. It's like a faint sound, an unnoticed whisper, that echoes in the corners of your mind, subtly shaping how you see the world. As you let go of these thoughts, you begin to feel the soft pull of relaxation, the anchoring bias itself fading into the distance as you embrace the peaceful quiet of the night. The halo effect. Why attractive people seem smarter. Imagine you're in a room full of people, each one presenting themselves in their own unique way. Some speak loudly, some quietly, while others smile effortlessly, exuding confidence with each passing moment. But among them, there is one person who seems to glow a little brighter than the rest. Their charm is undeniable. The way they stand, the way they talk, even the way they look, it all seems to suggest that they are someone worth paying attention to. The moment they enter the room, something shifts. You begin to assume that they must be smarter, more capable, more interesting than the others around them. It's not just that they look confident, but somehow their entire presence convinces you that they have it all figured out. This is the halo effect at work. The halo effect is a cognitive bias where our judgment of a person's character or abilities is overly influenced by their appearance or one single positive trait. If someone has one characteristic we find attractive, whether it's beauty, charm, or confidence, we tend to assume they have other positive traits as well, even without evidence. It's as if their attractiveness, be it physical or in some other form, casts a glowing aura over their entire personality. Think about someone who is physically attractive. It's not uncommon to find yourself assuming that they must also be intelligent, kind, or talented, purely based on their appearance. You haven't seen their intelligence in action, but the way they carry themselves, their confident posture, and their sparkling eyes make you believe they must possess all the qualities you value. Perhaps you see them as more competent at work, more deserving of admiration, or more skilled at what they do. simply because you've been swept up by the first impression. This bias doesn't just apply to physical beauty, it extends to other forms of charm too. Confidence is a key example. Someone who walks into a room with confidence might automatically be perceived as capable, as if their ability to hold themselves with such ease implies that they are an expert in whatever they're talking about. But the halo effect doesn't care about the content of their words. It cares about how they make you feel. The confidence they exude creates an image of a person who must also be wise, calm, and capable of making sound decisions. You've probably seen this happen, whether it's in a social setting or in the workplace. A person walks into a meeting, and there's something about their presence that commands attention. Maybe it's the way they carry themselves, or perhaps it's the way they interact with others. Without realizing it, your mind starts attributing qualities to them that have nothing to do with their actual skills or character. You assume they're good at their job, even though you haven't seen them perform any of their tasks. You think they're kind, simply because they smile often. The halo effect clouds your judgment, making the person seem more well-rounded and exceptional than they may actually be. This bias isn't limited to people you know personally. It affects how we see celebrities, public figures, or even politicians. Think about a famous actor, one you've only seen in movies or on television. Based on their roles, the way they look, or their on-screen persona, you might start to assume things about them, like their intelligence, their kindness, or even their political views. All of this is influenced by the glowing aura of their public image, which overshadows any deeper understanding of their true character. You don't know the real person, but the halo effect helps shape your perception of them in ways you may not even realize. But it doesn't stop there. The halo effect can also work in reverse, coloring our negative perceptions of people. Imagine someone you meet who is not conventionally attractive, or who doesn't carry themselves with the same confidence. You may, consciously or unconsciously, assume they lack other desirable traits, such as intelligence or kindness. A person with a less confident demeanor may be perceived as less capable, even if they are highly skilled and knowledgeable in their field. This is the reverse halo effect, where the absence of one positive trait, like confidence or physical attractiveness, leads you to assume that the person lacks a whole range of other positive traits, even though you haven't seen any evidence of this. Now think about the impact this bias can have on everyday interactions. It shapes hiring decisions, social relationships, and even how we evaluate others in professional settings. When someone walks into a room exuding confidence, you might immediately assume they're the right person for the job, even though you haven't seen any evidence of their qualifications. On the other hand, someone who's more reserved may not get the same benefit of the doubt, even if they're more qualified or experienced. The halo effect allows superficial qualities, things that are unrelated to actual ability, to drive our judgments and decisions. The most fascinating part of the halo effect is how automatic it is. It's a cognitive shortcut, one that doesn't require much thought or effort. When we see someone who seems to have it all together, it's easy to attribute all sorts of positive qualities to them. In fact, it feels almost natural to do so. This is because, as human beings, we tend to seek patterns in the world around us. We look for things that fit together neatly, that make sense based on our past experiences. If someone appears attractive, confident, or successful in one way, our minds automatically associate them with other positive traits. It's a convenient, efficient way for our brains to process information without needing to think too deeply. But the truth is, the halo effect isn't always accurate. The glowing aura we assign to people based on one trait often overshadows the complexity of who they really are. A person who appears confident may not always be as competent as we assume. A person who is attractive may not always be as kind or intelligent as we think. This bias can lead us to make judgments that aren't grounded in reality, affecting our relationships, our work, and even our self-perception. It's also important to remember that the halo effect works both ways. Just as it can make us see someone in an overly positive light based on one trait, it can also work in the opposite direction. When we form a negative impression of someone, perhaps because they seem insecure, or they don't look like we expect them to, we may unintentionally believe they possess other negative qualities as well. This is the reverse halo effect, where our initial negative judgment shapes the way we view everything about them, even though we don't have the full picture. In the end, the halo effect is a reminder of how powerful our first impressions can be, and how easily they can shape our perceptions of others. It's a bias that colors our world, often without us even realizing it, making us judge people based on the most superficial qualities. But the more we become aware of it, the more we can start to see beyond that first impression, to truly understand the complexity and depth of the people around us. It's about realizing that no one is defined by just one trait, and that beneath the surface, there's always more to discover. And so, as the night unfolds and you begin to relax deeper, let this thought settle gently into your mind. The people around you are more than just what they seem on the surface. Their true nature is far more complex, far more intricate than you could ever judge in a single glance. The halo effect may be a natural part of the way we perceive the world, but it doesn't have to be the lens through which we see others. The true beauty of a person, of any person, is found in the many layers they carry within themselves, not just in the first impression they leave. The framing effect. How wording changes your choices. There's a story from history about a soldier in ancient Greece. He was given a choice between two paths. One, where he would be celebrated for his bravery, receiving lavish rewards and admiration from all, and the other, where he would face the harsh consequences of a defeat, being remembered as a cautionary tale. Both paths, in reality, led to the same final destination. The soldier's fate was predetermined by the outcome of a battle. Yet the way the paths were framed, the words used to describe them, shaped his decision in a way that no one could have predicted. This is the power of framing. It's an invisible force that influences our decisions, our thoughts, and ultimately, our lives. The way information is presented can completely shift how we perceive a situation, even if the facts are identical. What seems like a simple choice may in fact be a carefully constructed path, one where the framing guides you toward a particular outcome. Imagine you're standing at a buffet, ready to pick your dinner. On one side, there's a section of food labeled as healthy options, filled with salads, lean meats, and fresh fruits. On the other side, there's a section labeled indulgent treats, with pizzas, cakes, and fried foods. Now, the food in both sections might be identical, but the way it's framed, the labels you read, affects how you perceive each dish. Healthy sounds like the better choice, while indulgent sounds like a guilty pleasure. Without realizing it, your decision is already being influenced by the words used to describe the food. The actual content hasn't changed, but your judgment has. The framing effect works in much the same way, only it's not just about food choices. It's about the way we perceive everything around us, from our decisions in the grocery store, to our career choices, to how we feel about people and events. The way something is presented can lead us to make completely different decisions, simply because the framing, how it's worded, changes the way we see it. In the world of marketing, the framing effect is everywhere. Imagine a sale where the sign reads 50% off versus save $10 on every $20 purchase. Both messages communicate the same idea, the same financial savings, but they do so in very different ways. One frames the deal as a percentage, emphasizing the magnitude of the discount, while the other focuses on the actual money saved, making it feel more tangible and real. In both cases, you may feel more or less inclined to make the purchase depending on which frame resonates with you. And it's not just in sales where framing plays a role, it's also deeply embedded in the choices we make every day. Think about a medical procedure you might need. A doctor may frame the potential outcomes of that procedure as a 90% success rate, which sounds encouraging and reassuring. However, the same doctor could also frame it as a 10% failure rate, which immediately feels riskier, even though both statements are telling you the exact same thing. The numbers don't change, only the way they're framed affects your perception. One frame makes you feel confident, while the other makes you feel anxious. This is a subtle but powerful influence on our decisions. The choice to present something in a positive light or a negative one can alter the very course of our actions, even if the underlying facts are the same. It's as though we are walking through a world full of frames, slightly distorted windows that shape how we see things, leading us to act based on emotions, biases, and subtle shifts in perspective. Have you ever noticed how politicians often speak in terms of us versus them? This framing technique is used to divide people into groups, creating an in-group that is framed positively and an out-group that is framed negatively. This framing strategy manipulates the way we think about others. It creates an emotional attachment to one group and fosters fear or distrust toward the other. The facts about these groups may remain the same, but the emotional framing around them can drastically change how we feel about the situation, which often leads to polarizing decisions. On a more personal level, the framing effect plays a role in how we view ourselves and our abilities. For instance, if someone tells you that you did a fantastic job, you're likely to feel good about yourself and more confident in your abilities. But what if someone instead frames your performance as acceptable or not bad? You might still have performed equally well, but the different framing will make you feel less accomplished or less proud of your work. The words used by others change your perception of your performance, which then affects how you view yourself and your future efforts. It's easy to overlook how framing influences our lives, but it's all around us, from how news reports are written to the way we talk about our day-to-day experiences. In the media, for instance, the same event can be framed in dramatically different ways, depending on the perspective. A protest could be framed as an important demonstration for change, or a dangerous disturbance in the streets. Both are describing the same event, but the way it's framed determines how the audience perceives it. Similarly, a company could announce layoffs as restructuring to create a more efficient workforce, or cutting jobs to save money, and the difference in how it's presented changes the emotional reaction to the news. Even in the way we perceive time, the framing effect can play a significant role. Consider how a deadline is framed. A task that is framed as urgent may feel overwhelming, while the same task framed as an opportunity to complete something early might seem more manageable and even exciting. The words used to describe an event shape how we react to it. This shift in perspective can either motivate us or create unnecessary stress, even though the task or event itself remains unchanged. Sometimes, the framing effect can even influence our long-term happiness. Think about how we view our lives compared to others. If you frame your life by focusing on what you have, your family, your friends, your health, you may feel grateful and content. But if you frame your life by focusing on what you lack, material possessions, achievements, or status, you might feel unsatisfied or envious. The facts of your life are the same, but the way you frame them affects your happiness. Our decisions aren't made in isolation. They are shaped by a network of influences, and one of the most pervasive influences is the way things are framed. Whether it's the way we look at a job opportunity, a relationship, or a simple purchase, framing shifts our focus and influences our choices, often in ways we aren't fully aware of. This is why becoming more conscious of framing can lead to better decision-making, helping us step back and recognize when we are being subtly influenced by the way information is presented. And so, think about the moments in your life where framing has shaped your choices, whether it was a decision at work, a purchase, or even a moment of self-reflection. The words used, the framing of the situation, may have played a bigger role than you realized. Understanding the framing effect allows us to take control of the narratives that shape our lives. It allows us to see things from a broader perspective, free from the influence of language that can distort our perception. The sunk cost fallacy. Why we can't walk away. Imagine you've been working on a project for months, pouring your energy and focus into it. You've spent countless hours drafting plans, writing reports, making calls, and dealing with setbacks. But now, as you look at it from a distance, you realize that it's not working. The project is failing, and every new decision seems to be taking you further from the finish line you hoped for. You know deep down that it might be time to walk away, but the thought of letting go feels impossible. After all, you've already invested so much. The hours, the resources, the effort, all those sunk costs weigh heavily on you. Walking away feels like giving up, like throwing everything you've invested down the drain. This feeling, this internal tug of war, is the essence of the sunk cost fallacy. It's a psychological trap we all fall into at some point in our lives. It's the reason we continue investing in a failing venture or a toxic relationship, even when all logic tells us it's time to let go. The sunk cost fallacy holds us hostage to our past decisions, convincing us that if we just keep going a little longer, things will improve, even when the evidence shows otherwise. The key to understanding this fallacy lies in the way we perceive our investments, time, money, effort, as something that cannot be wasted. We think that if we just put in a bit more, we'll recoup what we've already lost. In our minds, it's as though we've crossed a point of no return. If we leave now, all those hours spent, all those resources used, will have been in vain. But this is where the fallacy shows its power. The costs we've already sunk are gone. No matter what we do now, they can't be recovered. Yet, it's incredibly difficult to convince ourselves that walking away is the wisest choice. Think of a person stuck in a relationship that no longer brings them joy. They've invested years into it. There were good moments once, and the thought of leaving feels like betraying that past investment. The sunk cost fallacy keeps them stuck, convincing them that the time they've already spent together should somehow guarantee future happiness. They hold on, even when the relationship has become emotionally draining or unhealthy. It's not because they want to be unhappy. It's because the idea of letting go feels like acknowledging failure. The past feels like an anchor, tying them to the present. This fallacy can creep into every area of life, often in subtle ways. Imagine a person who's purchased a non-refundable ticket for an event they no longer want to attend. Even though they're tired, or the event no longer excites them, they go anyway. Why? Because the money has already been spent. The sunk cost fallacy convinces them that if they don't go, they will have wasted the money, when in fact, the money is already gone and can't be recovered. The real cost is the time and energy spent going, yet they push forward, feeling obligated to fulfill the commitment, even though the experience will likely bring no joy. Similarly, think of a person continuing to work long hours in a job they dislike. They've invested years climbing the ladder, earning promotions, and gaining experience. Walking away feels like throwing away everything they've worked for. The sunk cost fallacy makes them feel like they can't turn back, even though they feel unfulfilled and stressed. The weight of their past decisions, the time spent building their career, traps them in a cycle of dissatisfaction. It's easy to see how the sunk cost fallacy affects our decisions, but what's harder to recognize is how it also shapes our emotions. The longer we stay in a situation that isn't working, the more we tie our self-worth to it. We start to believe that the time we've invested is a reflection of our commitment, our effort, and even our value as individuals. If we give up, we fear we'll be seen as weak or indecisive. We fear that the time we spent will somehow define us, as though we've failed by not seeing things through to the end. This emotional attachment to past investments can cloud our judgment and prevent us from moving forward. The sunk cost fallacy isn't just about time and money, it's also about our identity. We identify with the things we've invested in, whether it's a relationship, a job, or a project. Letting go can feel like letting go of part of ourselves. The decision to walk away feels like acknowledging that all those hours and years were for nothing, even though they were valuable in their own right. The lessons learned, the growth experienced, and the memories made are all part of the journey, regardless of the outcome. But the fallacy convinces us that the only worthwhile investment is the one that leads to a clear, successful finish. There's a beauty in recognizing when something is no longer serving you, when the time has come to let go and move on. It's not an admission of failure, it's an act of wisdom, of knowing that there is always room for new opportunities, new experiences, and new paths to walk. But breaking free from the grip of the sunk cost fallacy takes courage. It requires us to step outside of the past and embrace the unknown, even though it feels uncomfortable. It means trusting that the future holds something greater than the weight of past mistakes or lost time. One of the most difficult aspects of the sunk cost fallacy is the way it affects our decisions in the moment. When we're deep in a situation, it's hard to see the bigger picture. The pressure to keep going, to salvage our investments feels overwhelming. But if we can pause, step back, and remind ourselves that what's already been invested cannot be regained, we can begin to make clearer, more rational choices. We can see that walking away doesn't mean losing. It means freeing ourselves to find something that truly aligns with our goals and values. This fallacy doesn't just trap individuals. It can also trap entire organizations, businesses, and even societies. Companies often continue to pour money into failing projects, unable to let go of the investments already made. Governments may stick to policies that no longer work, driven by the fear that reversing course would mean admitting past mistakes. The sunk cost fallacy is everywhere, influencing everything from global decisions to personal choices. In order to break free from the sunk cost fallacy, we must learn to detach our self-worth from the things we've invested in. We must accept that sometimes the wisest thing we can do is walk away. Letting go is not the same as failure. It's simply an acknowledgement that the path we've been on is no longer the one that will lead to growth. And by embracing this mindset, we open ourselves up to new possibilities, to fresh starts, and to the peace that comes with knowing we're no longer tethered to the past. The sunk cost fallacy will always be there, lurking in the background, ready to pull us back into old habits. But with awareness and self-reflection, we can begin to recognize its influence and take control of our decisions. Walking away may feel difficult, but it is often the most liberating choice we can make. Because when we release the hold of past investments, we make room for something even more valuable: the freedom to choose again, with clarity, purpose, and the wisdom that comes from knowing when to let go.
The bandwagon effect. Why we follow the crowd. Imagine being at a concert, the lights dimming as the crowd erupts into applause. The excitement is palpable. And then, as if on cue, everyone starts cheering and clapping in unison. You might not even know exactly what they're cheering for, but as you look around, you can't help but join in. The energy is contagious, and suddenly, you're part of something much bigger than yourself. Without even thinking about it, you've hopped on the bandwagon, swept up in the collective energy around you. It feels good, doesn't it? To be part of the crowd, to blend in and share that common moment. This is the essence of the bandwagon effect. It's a psychological phenomenon where we tend to adopt certain behaviors, beliefs, or attitudes simply because other people are doing the same. The more people around us seem to agree, the more we feel inclined to follow suit, even if we don't fully understand or even agree with what's happening. We're not just following the crowd for fun, we're driven by a deep-seated desire to fit in, to be accepted, and to feel that sense of belonging. The bandwagon effect is an old and powerful influence on human behavior. It explains why trends and fads catch fire so quickly, often spreading like wildfire before we even have time to question them. Think back to a time when a new fashion trend exploded overnight. Perhaps it was a specific brand of shoes or a style of clothing that seemed to flood every store, every magazine, every social media post. Before you knew it, everyone was wearing them, and soon, it felt like it would be strange not to. Even if you didn't fully like the trend, or didn't even think it was all that flattering, the pressure to be part of the group was hard to ignore. This instinct to follow the crowd isn't new. It's deeply ingrained in us, shaped by our evolutionary need for social connection and survival. In ancient times, being part of the group was essential for safety. If you didn't belong to the tribe, you were more vulnerable to dangers, whether that meant wild animals or other groups that might pose a threat. So our brains are wired to follow the social cues of others, to mimic behaviors, and to trust the collective judgment. But in today's world, this drive to follow the crowd is not always tied to survival. Often it's tied to the much more subtle desire for social validation. Consider how this effect plays out in the realm of social movements. Think about the rise of environmental awareness or political movements that gain massive traction. Once a few people start to advocate for a cause, others begin to jump on the bandwagon. They align themselves with the movement, not because they have deeply considered the issues, but because it feels good to be part of something that everyone else is supporting. Being on the right side of history, feeling that collective energy, becomes more important than personal investigation or even understanding the nuances of the cause. The same principle can be seen in the way people vote. Imagine a political candidate who gains initial popularity. Maybe their message resonates with a few people, and suddenly, everyone else seems to be supporting them. The more people jump on the bandwagon, the more others feel compelled to do the same, even if their own beliefs and preferences haven't fully aligned with the candidate. It's as if the crowd's enthusiasm becomes enough to convince us to follow, not because we've thought critically about the choice, but because it feels reassuring to be part of the majority. This is not just about big movements or important life decisions. It can show up in the smallest of moments, influencing everything from the food we eat to the way we spend our leisure time. Think about the last time you joined your friends in watching a popular TV show or movie. Perhaps before that moment, you hadn't even been interested in the show, but because everyone around you was talking about it, hyping it up, and urging you to join in, you decided to give it a try. And once you watched a few episodes, it started to grow on you. It wasn't just the content of the show that drew you in, but the social pressure, the sense of unity with those around you. It was easier to follow the crowd than to stand alone. The bandwagon effect doesn't just shape the way we think, it also shapes the way we feel. It can impact our self-perception and even our self-esteem. Being part of a popular group or trend can make us feel validated, like we're making the right choices because everyone else is doing it. It gives us a sense of belonging, of being included in something bigger than ourselves. But beneath the surface, this validation can be hollow because it's based on the approval of others, not our own true desires or beliefs. In the world of advertising and marketing, the bandwagon effect is used strategically to drive consumer behavior. Have you ever noticed how ads often highlight the popularity of a product, showing how many people are buying it, or how it's been endorsed by celebrities or influencers? This is no accident. It's a clever way to leverage our natural inclination to follow the crowd. When we see others using a product or endorsing a service, we're more likely to think it must be good, even if we haven't personally experienced it. The bandwagon effect taps into our need to fit in, to be part of the popular crowd, and marketers know how to exploit this desire to influence our purchasing decisions. The effect is even more powerful in the digital age. With social media platforms providing constant updates on what everyone is doing, what they're wearing, and what they're buying, the bandwagon effect has become more pronounced. We're bombarded with images of friends, family, and strangers, all aligning with certain trends, opinions, or products. The fear of missing out, or FOMO, amplifies the pressure to jump on the bandwagon. If everyone else seems to be enjoying something, it can feel almost unnatural to resist. But despite its widespread influence, the bandwagon effect can sometimes lead us astray. Just because a large group of people believe something, or because something is popular, doesn't necessarily make it right, or the best choice for us. The danger lies in the fact that we're often following the crowd, without critically examining the situation for ourselves. We might choose to participate in a fad, adopt a belief, or buy into a product, not because it genuinely fits our needs, but because it's what everyone else is doing. There's also the issue of conformity. When we see others act in a certain way, we instinctively want to align ourselves with them. This desire for social approval is so strong that we may suppress our true feelings or preferences to fit in. We may pretend to like something, to agree with a point of view, or to adopt a behavior simply because it feels easier to follow the crowd than to stand out. It's easier to nod along with the group than to risk being perceived as different or out of touch. Yet there's a freedom in recognizing the power of the bandwagon effect and choosing to step back from it. By becoming aware of this psychological pull, we can learn to make more independent decisions, ones that reflect our true values and desires, rather than simply mimicking the choices of those around us. It's not about rejecting social connection or belonging, but rather about cultivating the strength to follow our own path when it truly matters. In the end, the bandwagon effect is a reminder of how interconnected we all are, how easily we are influenced by the world around us. But it's also an invitation to pause, to reflect, and to ask ourselves, is this something I truly want, or am I just following the crowd?
It's an opportunity to carve out space for our own unique thoughts and choices, even when the crowd is loud and tempting. In that space, we can find our own voice, free from the sway of the masses, and create a path that feels authentic and true to who we are. The IKEA effect, the strange power of building something yourself. Have you ever found yourself looking at a piece of furniture you just assembled, or a project you just finished, and feeling an unexpected sense of pride? It's a strange feeling, isn't it? The same item, had you bought it already put together, might not have inspired the same sense of accomplishment, but now, with your hands on it, your effort woven into every screw and every step, it feels as though it has more meaning. The more time you spent assembling it, the more it seems like it's yours, and there's a certain satisfaction in knowing that you built it with your own hands, even if it's nothing extraordinary. This is what psychologists call the IKEA effect. It's the surprising phenomenon where people tend to overvalue things they've had a hand in building or creating, even when the final product isn't objectively better than something they could have bought without the effort. This psychological bias explains why DIY projects, personal investments, and even homemade meals often carry a sense of pride, even if the outcome doesn't necessarily match the effort put in. It's as if, through the process of creation, we imbue these things with a deeper sense of meaning, as though they are more valuable because of the labor we've put into them. It's fascinating, really, how the act of making something, no matter how simple or imperfect, can shift our perception of its worth. If you've ever built a bookshelf, or a table, or even just put together a puzzle, you've likely experienced this feeling. When the instructions are in front of you, and you're twisting screws into place, or carefully fitting pieces together, you're not just assembling a product, you're investing something deeper, your time, your attention, your care. And when it's done, you look at the finished product and think, I did that, this is mine. There's a sense of ownership that goes beyond physical possession, a sense that the object is somehow infused with a part of you. The IKEA effect gets its name from the popular furniture company, which is known for selling products that require assembly. It's easy to imagine the process. You pick out a flat pack box, bring it home, and then spend some time carefully following the instructions. And at the end of that process, you're left with a product that, while functional, may not be any different from a pre-assembled version you could have purchased. But somehow, the one you built yourself feels more special. Perhaps it's a bookshelf, or a table, or even a lamp. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you were involved in the process, that you spent your time creating it. In many ways, the IKEA effect speaks to something deeper within us. We don't just want things, we want experiences. We want the feeling that we've worked for something, that we've shaped it with our hands, that we've created something that didn't exist before. The satisfaction doesn't come from the object itself, it comes from the journey we took to get there. It's a reminder that the process of creation is often more fulfilling than the end result. And this bias doesn't just apply to physical objects like furniture, it extends to many areas of our lives. Think about the meals we cook for ourselves. It's often the simplest dishes that taste the best when we've made them ourselves, even though, objectively, there's no reason a dish from a restaurant wouldn't be just as good, or even better. But when we've put our own effort into preparing a meal, the experience of creating something from scratch becomes part of the enjoyment. Each chop of the knife, each stir of the pot, contributes to a deeper connection to the meal. And when we sit down to eat, it's not just food, it's something we made with our hands. It's ours. The same principle applies to relationships too. The more effort we put into nurturing a relationship, the more value we often assign to it. Think about the friendships and connections in your life. The ones that you've worked hard to build through long conversations, shared experiences, and mutual care often feel more meaningful. They're not just relationships, they're the result of time, effort, and emotional investment. It's the same with hobbies or projects we take on. The more we invest our energy into something, the more we feel a sense of ownership over it. The deeper our commitment, the more special it becomes. But of course, this effect isn't always beneficial. In some cases, it might lead us to hold on to things or relationships long after they've stopped serving us. It's easy to become attached to something
because of the time and effort we've already invested, even if it no longer meets our needs. This is where the IKEA effect can become problematic. When we've spent a lot of time and energy on something, we might convince ourselves that it's more valuable than it truly is, simply because we've already sunk so much into it. In relationships, in projects, in possessions, the effect can create a false sense of attachment. And yet, even in these situations, the power of the IKEA effect lies in its ability to remind us of the value of effort. It's a reflection of our desire to be part of something, to contribute, to create. Even when things don't turn out perfectly, there's still a sense of accomplishment in knowing we gave something our time, attention, and care. It's a reminder that meaning isn't always about the end result. It's about the journey, about the moments we spend working, creating, and investing. When we apply this principle to larger life goals, like building a career, pursuing a passion, or creating a family, we see the same effect at play. The more we invest in something, the more we feel connected to it. The more we give of ourselves, the more it becomes part of us. Our work, our hobbies, our relationships, each one becomes a reflection of who we are, of the effort we've put in, and of the meaning we've derived from the process. In a way, the IKEA effect teaches us a valuable lesson. It shows us that the things we create with our own hands are not just objects, they're expressions of ourselves. When we invest our time and effort into something, we make it a part of us. And that sense of ownership is something that's hard to replicate. It's not just about the result, it's about what we've learned, what we've experienced, and what we've shared along the way. It's why the small acts of creation can feel so fulfilling. Whether it's putting together a piece of furniture, preparing a meal, or crafting something from scratch, there's an innate joy in knowing that you were the one who brought it into being. Even the imperfections, the missteps, and the mistakes become part of the story. They add to the sense of achievement. They remind us that it's not always about perfection, it's about effort. It's about putting something of yourself into the world and watching it take shape, no matter how small the final product may seem. So the next time you build something, or cook something, or take on a DIY project, remember that the value isn't just in the final product, it's in the process, it's in the effort, it's in the fact that you made something with your own hands, and that is something no one can take away from you. The IKEA effect reminds us that the journey of creation, the act of building something from scratch, is often where the true value lies. And as we look at the things we've created, we're reminded that the more effort we put into something, the more meaningful it becomes, not just in our eyes, but in the fabric of our lives. And so, as we reach the end of this journey through the fascinating quirks of the mind, take a moment to let it all settle. The way our brains filter the world, the way we latch onto patterns and perceptions, it's all part of the quiet magic of being human. The thoughts that have drifted through your mind tonight, the ideas that have taken root, will linger in the background, weaving themselves into your understanding in their own time. There's no rush, no need to hold on to anything too tightly. Just let the words fade into the distance, like ripples in a still lake, dissolving into calm. The world will keep turning, thoughts will come and go, and the mind will do what it does best. Observe, absorb, and gently let things pass. For now, just rest in the quiet space between thoughts, where everything is soft, effortless, and peaceful.